Hi, I'm Lindsay Cowell, and I'm going to talk to you today about women's suffrage. There are 5 women that are central to the women's suffrage. Without them, we wouldn't have the right to vote. Women's suffrage began in 1820s. The women of the 1800s were supposed to be seen and not heard. They were supposed to be historians that called them true women. They were to be pious, submissive, and mothers concerned with their homes and families. The women that fought for women's suffrage were supposed to be obedient, but there were no way these women could have been obedient. They were strong-willed, smart leaders that fought for the right and life that women now know. These women were also wanted to be involved in more than just running of their homes and taking care of their families. We need to remember them and where we came from. How hard it was for these women just a few years ago. It doesn't seem like it's been that long ago, but it has. I chose this topic because I needed to be reminded as well. I've always been intrigued by the women's suffrage. I watched a movie that portrayed Alice Paul called Iron Jawed Angels. I went on to look at many journal entries and read the 19th Amendment. There are 5 women that intrigued me the most. In the beginning, it was Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Lucretia Mott, Jane Hunt, Martha Coffin Wright, and Mary Ann McClintock. It took until the end of the Civil War for the government to start questioning the suffrage and citizenship of women. After the government granted slaves the freedom and rights to vote, they started to see that women needed the same. It took a long time for the government to see that women did need same rights as the slaves, such as education, ownership of land, and the right to vote. First, I want to talk about how these women met. There were so many great women that there is a couple that fought for slavery and then went on to fight for women's rights. The first major place they gathered was Seneca Falls, New York, to discuss women's rights. The leaders of this gathering were Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott. This meeting started out as a tea party, a group of well-behaved women having a tea party with June Hunt. June Hunt invited these 4 women, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Lucretia Mott, and her sister Martha Wright, and Mary Ann McClintock. During this meeting, as women do, they changed women's lives forever. Elizabeth and Lucretia first met at the World Anti-Slavery Convention when they each went with their husbands. They were told to stand behind a rope barrier and were not allowed to voice their opinions or vote on anything. When Elizabeth and Lucretia headed home after this meeting, they vowed to have a meeting to advocate for the rights of women. When Elizabeth and Lucretia met June Hunt, Elizabeth and Lucretia met her through Lucretia's Quaker families. These Quaker women were angry over the way women were being treated. June Hunt was sisters with Martha Wright and knew Mary Ann McClintock because of, again, their Quaker families. The women in Quaker families were raised to believe that women were equal to men and not property. Women were sent to school and educated just as men. The first woman that started everything was Elizabeth Cady Stanton. She was born in 1815, died in 1832. She was from a wealthy family. They owned slaves, and her father was a lawyer, elected to 1 term in office and judge for many years. Her brother died when she was very young, so she became the boy that he needed. She learned how to ride, learned Greek. She spent many hours listening to her father's clients complain about the injustice of women. She would leave her children and husband for long periods of time so that she could fight for what was right. Lucretia Mott was born 1793, died 1880, was raised as a Quaker, and taught to believe that men and women were equals in the eyes of God. Went to boarding school in Boston and was an assistant teacher. She became a preacher in the 20s, and she was the founder of Philadelphia Female Anti-Slavery Society. June Hunt, born 1812, died 1889, raised as a Quaker as well. Husband encouraged her to live as an equal, and he suggested that she have this tea party. Martha Coffin Wright, born 1806, died 1875, sister to Lucretia Mott, raised again as a Quaker, first fell in love with a man that was not a Quaker, married him anyways, and was frustrated over the restrictions of being married to a non-Quaker. Mary Ann McClintock, born 1800s, died 1884, raised as a Quaker. Husband and Mary together owned a drugstore. They refused to sell items that were made by slaves and circulated anti-slavery petitions, invited fugitive slaves into their home as one of the stations of the Underground Railroad. It was very much inevitable that she would start fighting for the cause of women's rights. The Tea Party, as all women do, they talked about their issues as women, babies, husbands, what happened at the supermarket, how this man treated them, education, voting, owning property. Wrote the advertisement to the local newspaper, Women's Rights Convention, a convention to discuss the social, civil, and religious conditions of the rights of the women that held in Seneca Falls, New York on Wednesday and Thursday, the 19th and 20th of July at 10 a.m. During the first day of the meeting, it will be held exclusively for women who are earnestly invited to attend. The public generally are invited to present on the second day when Lucretia Mott and the Philadelphia other ladies and gentlemen will address the convention. Mary Ann McClintock hosted the planning party at her house. At this time, herself, two daughters, and Elizabeth Cady Stanton wrote the Declaration of Sentiments. The convention drew in hundreds of attendees, remembered as the spark that kindled the American women's movement. Signed by 68 women and 32 men, Elizabeth Cady Stanton read this amendment. After the convention, many women went on to having meetings in their own areas. 1850, the first National Women's Rights Convention was held and attracted more than 1,000 attendants. In the end, these women did not see the passing of Amendment 19, giving women the right to vote, but we would not be where we are at now if it wasn't for these women. To this day, as so many women live up to this challenge of being the women that these women were, I just hope that someday I will make them proud from where they are looking down. Thank you.